Hi, Kitchen Kings and Queens. Okay, we are back with our Oster Kitchen Center. Today we're going to make pizza. And for honesty's sake, I'm looking at my ingredients here because I doubled the recipe. I think we may have to switch to the KitchenAid. Just because that's the biggest capacity mixer that I have. And that's usually the one I use for a double batch. So we'll see what we get here. But we may have to switch to that one. Okay, so we're going to make my version of pizza dough. And this is just an all-purpose pizza dough. It's great for just like a traditional New York style pizza. So you use 3 cups of very warm water. To that, you're going to add 2 packs of yeast, which equals 4.5 teaspoons of yeast. Okay, so we're going to add that in there. And then we're also going to add 2 teaspoons of sugar. And this is an important step. And you also have to kind of whisk in the yeast, break it up a little bit, and then you have to let it sit. Okay, this is what's called blooming the yeast. Okay, and this process basically gets the yeast out of sleeping. Okay, so you're gonna kind of wake it up and give it some food to get it started on its merry way. Okay, so we're just gonna wait a couple minutes while this all blooms. And what's happening is the yeast is a microorganism. And when you add it to the warm water, it kind of brings it back to life. And then when you give it some sugar, then you're feeding it. So it really starts coming back to reality. Okay, so that's the process that you start with here. Then we're going to incorporate the flour, and the flour that I use, there's 8 cups of flour in here. If you want to half this recipe, you would use 4 cups of flour. But there's 2 different types of flour in here. There is 00 flour, which is an Italian flour that's used heavily in baking. And then there's another flour that's called bread flour. So there's no all-purpose flour in here. So if you want to make this recipe, you're going to have to kind of go to the store and find these flours. They are in every supermarket. The 00 used to be impossible to find. It's now in the international foods in the Italian section in just about every supermarket. If you can't, for whatever reason, find it, you can use all bread flour. That works perfectly fine. But the 00 really does make a difference. That's the flour that they use in Italy. It's specifically kind of used and specified for pizza making in Italy. So it's a really good flour to use. So try and find it. You can get it on Amazon if you can't get it at your grocery store. So there's always somewhere that you can get it. Okay, so that's going to be there. And then there's 2 types of oils in here. Okay, so there's 4 tablespoons of oil in here. So if you were doing a single batch, you would use 2 tablespoons, and you would use 1 of each. In this case, we doubled it, so there's 2 of each. So 2 tablespoons of olive oil and 2 tablespoons of corn oil. Okay, corn oil is the secret ingredient to Chicago-style deep dish pizza. Surprise, surprise, the Midwest, that they use corn oil. But that's what gives it that rich, buttery flavor in the dough in Chicago deep dish pizza. So I incorporate it in with my pizza dough. You can use all olive oil. Okay, that's usually what I use, but since I found out about the corn oil, I've been incorporating that into there. So it makes for a really neat addition to the dough. But if you just want to use olive oil, that's usually what I use. So that's fine too. And then there's 4 teaspoons of salt here. If you were doing a single batch, you would use 2 teaspoons of salt. And notice we're not putting that in now because that is going to slow down the growth of the yeast, okay? It kind of stops it or slows it down. And we don't want that. We want the yeast to do its job, okay? So the yeast will start bubbling. If you have really fast-acting yeast, it may get foamy in there. So those are some of the signs that you have active yeast. And that's why you do this process, so that you know that the yeast is working and that it will get to where you want to. Also, I'm using the designer series because I just got the dough hooks and the beaters for it. Even though this was made, they were making the regular kitchen center at the same time that they made this one. This was just more stylish. It was to, really compete with like the 1990s era kitchen. So they made it very sleek and nice, solid state controls here, which you may not be able to see from the flour. There's a nice little toggle here that has a nice smooth dial. So it's really a major redesign. And with that redesign, they also redesigned this transmission or the dough arm of the mixer part and what that goes into. So that resulted in even the slicer shredder food processor attachment changed as well. So this has mostly new components. The only thing that didn't change is the blender because that was their standard design. So the blender stayed and the blender related attachments. So like these little grinder, little containers, blend and store, because they use the blender base. So there's also a food processor attachment, which I have. It's very similar to the Oscar, but I have to dig that out. It's somewhere in the attic or in the transition room, which is the guest room that leads into the attic. So that's where that is. Okay, so we're gonna add the oil into this mixer, and then we're gonna start adding the flour, and we're gonna add it a little bit at a time. So hopefully we can get it all in there. And this mixer, the really cool thing that I just realized about this mixer with these like beater kneading dough hooks here, this is very similar to the Italian style mixer that's used for pizza, like pizza making in Italy. So I'm excited to see how this works. It really does a good job of kneading. It does things much quicker than the KitchenAid, just because it has these double beater action. It has the very similar power, and it has a nice opening here for me to pour the flour. So let's start mixing and see where we get. So whenever you're mixing, you want to start on low settings. Okay, for this mixer though, it says the kneaders should be at 5. So we're gonna start at 4. And we're gonna add it in and see how we get. And I'm just gonna incorporate little by little as I add that in. So we're about halfway there of the flour, and it's doing a pretty good job so far. So that's a good sign. Hopefully we could stay with this mixer because this is the highlight. So all this week we're gonna highlight these mixers or these kitchen centers and the things that they can do. So I'm going to incorporate both the Oster Kitchen Centers and we're also going to look at the Sunbeam Food Center. Okay, so this is actually coming along pretty good. So we're going to add some more flour in. And I'm also going to add in the salt at this point. Okay, and just so we don't lose any flour, I went off to the side a little bit. And again, the good thing about this this style mixer, I can manipulate this mixer. Okay, so we're gonna add the last of the flour in, and you can kind of, you know, stir it around and let it do its thing, okay? So if it seems like it needs a little more mixing here or there, somewhere, you just kind of move the bowl and it will incorporate that into it, okay? So, we're just gonna, like, the interesting thing about these beater hooks is that they move the bowl kind of like by a foot motion like this in the mixer. So it's very interesting how that works. But you can still manipulate it yourself this way. And I'm going to just use my spatula here, and we're going to try and incorporate that in. And again, you can kind of help it along, incorporating this in, and that's going to help mix the dough better. Okay? And this dough is really, it's tough. It's a tough dough. This is a real, like, bread dough. So it's really holding its own with mixing this dough. And we're just gonna mix the dough today, and then we're gonna let it rest and rise, and then we're gonna put it in the refrigerator. And then we're going to come back and make the pizza. So one of the reasons why I make such a double batch of the dough is because the pizza dough is the hardest part of making pizza. Like, that's the thing that you have to be sure you have on hand to make pizza. So whenever I make dough, I make a lot of it so that I can freeze it, so that I can have it for other days while I'm making, if I want to make more pizzas. So it's really good to have that in there. And I'm going to add a little bit more oil in here. I think that will help this along a little bit. Okay? And you really can't add too much oil, okay? Because the oil just helps the dough to kind of get brown. It keeps it from being too sticky. So adding a little bit more oil is never a bad idea, okay? And we just want to make sure all of this dough is mixed in, and it's looking really good. I mean, I'm going to turn it up to 5, because that's what they recommend. And I think that will kind of help this along too. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so it just keeps getting better. And the one thing that from having used this mixer before for things, you want to keep an eye on the dough hooks, because sometimes it will climb up the hooks, but it's actually doing a really good job here, so I don't think we have to worry about that problem right now. It's really kneading this dough well. It's the dough's getting really nice and smooth, and it's really doing a great job. So as you can see, I don't even have to move it now. It's just incorporating itself, and those feet pushing and kneading really kind of moves things along. But you can still do that because the turntable allows you to do that. Okay? So a little bit there, a little bit popped out. Okay, so our dough is done. And I'm going to pull up the beaters here so you can see. And this, listen, I'm already sold on this machine, but the fact that this thing could handle a double batch of my pizza dough and did it as well as it did, I am super impressed with this machine. It really did a great job. So there's the dough, and I'm just going to kind of take it out of the bowl just so that I can oil the bowl. I'm going to use the same one. A lot of people don't. A lot of people will, a lot of recipes especially, will tell you put it in a clean bowl. It doesn't need that. Why make more dishes for yourself? It doesn't impede the rising or anything, so there's no reason to do that. But the dough is really, I have not kneaded on this counter yet. It's a good sized counter, but it's a little tight for kneading. So even when you mix in the KitchenAid, right before you do this, you just kind of want to smooth out the dough. Let me get my oil here. Okay, we're gonna just put some oil in the bottom there. Like I said, you can't put too much oil in this. I mean, I guess you can. I guess it could get too greasy. But adding oil and flour, you'll see when we actually make the pizza that you need to add flour. Okay, I'm actually gonna. I think the problem is that I'm kneading on the wrong section here. So I'm gonna move this over, and I'm just gonna knead this direction. Okay, so it's just a matter of stretching out the dough and smoothing it out. Okay, so now you're gonna take the dough, you're gonna bundle it all together, and then you're gonna put the top part in, oil it, then flip it, and then you're gonna make sure that both sides are oiled, okay? Then what you wanna do is you want to leave this out for a couple hours, okay? I'm gonna put some plastic wrap on it. You can put plastic wrap, you can put a kitchen towel over it, but I'm gonna put plastic wrap because I just want, it's gonna sit out and proof for a little bit, for a couple hours, and then I'm gonna put it in the refrigerator. And this is a good idea. We're not gonna make this pizza till tomorrow. So it's really a good idea to make your dough the day before, okay? You're gonna at least have to do this rising step for a couple hours, okay? It has to double in size. So the dough will come up, probably in this bowl, it'll come up to the plastic wrap, okay? And that's fine. That's what it's supposed to do. That's showing that it's alive. It's showing that the yeast is active, and it's going to show you that you're going to have good dough. So that's the dough making process. So we will probably not come back. Well, we'll be back in the video in seconds, but you will not see that this will sit. It will rise for 2 hours. Maybe I'll show a picture of that, and then I'm going to put it in the refrigerator, and then it's going to sit in the refrigerator overnight, and then tomorrow, before we make our pizza, we're going to portion it up into balls, because you could probably get, depending on the size of the pizza that you want to make, that will make, for me, probably 4 pizzas, because I like to make a big pizza on the pizza stone in the oven, or I would make it in a grill. Now, I just got a pizza oven for the outdoor kitchen that I'm hopefully going to build this summer. And that is a Neapolitan pizza oven. It's from Italy, it's gas, it's portable, and a Neapolitan pizza is much smaller. It's about 12 inches, which is the size of a ruler. So that uses a different type of dough. It uses a different process. The pizza cooks in like 3 minutes. 3 minutes maximum, I think. I think it's like 1.5 minutes, because the oven is up to like 900 degrees. While as this one that I'm going to make, it'll be similar. It'll be made on a brick in the oven, a pizza stone, which is just a brick. And it will be at my oven, which is only at 500 degrees. That's the highest household ovens go to. So this cooks at a very high temperature, and it cooks very quickly in that oven. So when the weather warms and I set up the outdoor kitchen, we'll do Neapolitan pizzas. So if you've seen our other videos, you've seen we've done deep dish, we did fried Northeast Pennsylvania fried Sicilian pizza, which is like a pan pizza. And then we're gonna do this New York style. We'll do a deep dish at one point, and we'll do a Detroit style, which is really fun. And then in the summer, or the warmer months, we'll do Neapolitan pizza. So there's lots of stuff to be seen. We're gonna use this baby a little bit more tomorrow when I have a big block of cheese here that is thawing. Actually, it's thawed. I'm gonna transfer that to the refrigerator now. And we're gonna slice that using the shredding attachment. Slice it. We're gonna shred it using the shredding attachment for the food processor for this. And then we're also this week gonna do a recipe for crepes, really good dinner crepes, and we're gonna make cream chicken to fill the crepes, and then we're gonna make the batter in the crepe or in the blender here, which is the best place. You would think maybe the mixer, but no. The crepes are best made in a blender because the batter is very light and very liquidy. So it's made in the blender, not the mixer. So we'll use the blender, we use the mixer today, and we'll use the food processor attachment to shred the cheese. We'll also make some pizza sauce tomorrow, and we will make some different topping options for that. And we'll also make a little some sauteed mushrooms to go over top of the crepes when we do the crepes. Okay, so there's a lot coming up. I'm sorry, I wanted to do it yesterday, but this has been a very busy weekend. So I'm a little behind on my recording schedule and my planning schedule, but we'll have some fun recipes this week and you'll see all that. All right, see you in a couple minutes, Kitchen Kings. It's perfect. So we're gonna have some delicious pizzas tomorrow. Okay, so we'll be back and we will make some sauce and shred some cheese and get some of these pizzas in the oven. Hi, Kitchen Kings and Queens. Hi, Kitchen Kings and Queens. Welcome back. Okay, so I'm gonna push this ahead and we're gonna work on the dough first. Actually, before we do that, I'm gonna preheat the oven to 500 degrees on the convection bake setting. The reason why I'm going to do this is because we need an hour's preheat time of the stones so that they're hot enough to recreate what a deck oven in a pizza shop is like. This is essential. If you really want that crisp bottom on your pizza, you have to do that. Okay? The other thing we're going to do is we're going to prepare the sauce. Okay? And pizza sauce, let me put this back there. Pizza sauce gets a lot of additional things to it that people add. That's not what pizza sauce should be like. Okay, pizza sauce should be very simple. Okay, it's the tomato. I'm sorry, I just gotta break this seal here. There we go. Okay, so we're using the tomatoes that if you watched my previous videos, we canned. And I'm gonna do something because of these these jarred tomatoes that I've never done before. Okay, I am going to add sugar because what I found was when I changed the acidity of these tomatoes, it really kind of flattened out the flavor. And that can be adjusted by adding baking soda or adding sugar to kind of wake up the tomato flavor. So I've tried the baking soda. You can really quickly mess it up with that. So I'd rather just add a little sugar to this. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start in the pan, and there's some tomato in here from another sauce I made. I'm going to start with a tablespoon of olive oil. Okay, that's what makes a pizza sauce heavy pizza sauce. If you were to just cook the tomato, that would just be regular tomato sauce, and that's fine. Honestly, I've made pizza with passata, which is this, and that was it, and a little bit of salt, and it came out great because that's really what you want to shine. So we're not going to add a whole lot of stuff to this. We're just going to kind of add things that are going to accentuate the tomato flavor. Okay, so we added some oil in there. Now we're going to add in the tomato. Okay, and this tomato is really, really good. Okay, the flavor when I was jarring it was incredible. But like I said, because of adding a little acid to acidify this, it just kind of flattened the flavor of the tomatoes. Okay, so we're just going to stir this up a little bit just to get that the tomato incorporated. There's also some basil in here. The basil has done its job. Okay, it has flavored the tomato, so we're going to take that out because we really don't need that. It's not going to add anything to the sauce, so we're just going to take that out. Then we're going to add our seasonings. Okay, so like I said, hate this. I hate that I have to do this. Next year I am not acidifying my tomatoes. I think that was the problem. I think our tomatoes are already acidic enough in this part of the country that we do not need to acidify the tomatoes. But this was my first time. I can't go back in time and change it, so I can only change it in this state. So I'm going to add a teaspoon of sugar into this sauce, okay? And I may have to add more. I don't think I will, but I don't want it to be sweet. I just want the normal sweetness of the tomato to come out. So that's why I had to add that, because the acidification of it really kind of numbed or dulled the flavor of the tomato. Then I'm going to use a teaspoon of salt, okay? And in this case, I'm using garlic salt because the only seasoning that I like to add to my tomato sauce, and again, this is preference, you don't need to do this, but it does add a nice flavor. Tomato and garlic go really well together, so I want to add some garlic salt. Then I have a half teaspoon of onion powder and garlic powder. Okay, so again, we're amping up that garlic flavor, and the onion powder is going to increase the savoriness of the tomato. Okay, and then the last thing that we're going to add is pepper. And you can add ground black pepper, you can add ground white pepper. That's what I would recommend using because it'll kind of go into the sauce and you won't have like specks of the black pepper. Or if you like a little spice, which I do, I'm using pepperoncini. Okay, that's normally what I would use, but I have this great Pepper Palace Chop House seasoning, and it's basically black pepper, pepperoncini, and some salt, and just a couple other like seasonings. So we're gonna add that in, like paprika and maybe a little cayenne. And that's going to add a little bit of heat to this. Not a lot, but there will be a little bit of heat. Again, if you want to stay to a very, very Italian style tomato sauce, get a pint of passata, a little bit of oil. I would bring it down to a teaspoon of oil. Okay, just so that it gives it a little body. Cook it, a little bit of salt, maybe a little bit of pepper, and that's it. I like these elements of the tomato sauce to kind of amp up. The tomatoes, other than the spice factor of the pepper, tomatoes have these natural things. They have that richness that the onion accentuates and the garlic accentuates. It has the sweetness that's naturally in the tomatoes that I kind of over acidified out of the tomato sauce. Okay, so we're gonna cook this, and you don't have to cook. This is not spaghetti sauce. This is not marinara. This is not some great long, slow cooking sauce. This cooks in the pizza. Okay, the steam comes up through, especially when you're cooking on a brick. The steam will come up through the brick as the dough is cooking, and it's going to cook this tomato sauce more. So you really don't even have to cook it at all. But if you do cook it, you just want to cook it for a little bit. So I just want to get these flavors all kind of melded together. Again, if I was just using the passata and some tomato or salt, that would be great, and that would have been perfect for the pizza. I would not have had to cook it. You might want to cook it a little bit because passata is thin. This would be perfect for a pizza sauce if it wasn't flat because of the acid. So that's why I'm going to cook it a little bit. But the texture of this, the strained tomatoes, and the tomato strainer that I use is the coarse strain. So you're really going to get like a nice pulpy, meaty bit, but it's not like chunks of tomato, which I don't like. It's just a really hearty tomato. Okay, so while that's cooking, we're going to get to the dough. These things are called dough caps, okay? They're what's used to store the dough. I have more of them. I'm trying to get them all of this brand, which is called Allied Metal Spinning. They are not, unfortunately, in existence anymore. They were in New York. And they are really the best. I mean, they're really quality aluminum. They're light, but they're durable. They're heavy gauge, and they just do a really good job. Okay, so we're going to use those to store the dough. We're going to make 2 pizzas today. So this dough here, and you could see it actually rose up over where it was when I showed you the last time, and it rose up to the edge of the cling film. This would have probably gone more if I had not had the cling film. If I had like a towel on it, it would go a little bit more. Okay, so we're going to take out our dough here, and we're going to bring it out onto there. I'm going to keep the bowl because I'm going to store the 2 balls that we're going to use today. I'm going to make 2 different pizzas. I'm going to make a plain cheese pizza, and I'm going to make a kind of supreme-ish style pizza. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to take the dough and you want to divide it in half. Okay, you have to decide what size pizzas you want to make. Like I said, I like to make the big pizzas, so I'm going to divide that in half, and then I'm going to divide the half in half. And then just like we did before, I'm going to take the dough and I'm going to ball it up into a round. Okay, we're going to tuck it under, and then we're going to pop it in here. And we're going to leave this out because the dough needs to come back up to temp. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing here. Again, the dough is just, that mixer, I'm really, really impressed with that. I really, I'm a convert to that style of mixing. And that is what, in Italy, that's the type of mixers they use, a spiral mixer like that. Okay? So these, again, I'm not going to use these today, but I am going to leave them out just so that they get up to temperature. They can kind of rise and fall. And I think I'm actually going to freeze those if I could free up some room in my freezer. Because this process is not very labor intensive, but it's time consuming. Because as you saw, I'm wearing different clothes because this is the next day. Okay, so you need to really let the dough sit. You need to let the dough sit out and come up to temperature. We can't really use it cold. The oven needs to heat up. So it all works time-wise. All the things that need to happen are going to happen together, but they do require time. If you have the dough already and I just have to take that dough out and leave it out all day long while I'm at work, I can come home and I can make some pizza. And that's pretty great for me. Okay? So these two, the one that I put in that bowl, in the original mixer bowl, and I'm going to put this one in this bowl. These are the ones that I'm going to use today. Okay? So notice the dough did not really stick. That's because we had oiled the bowl and we oiled the dough, so the dough has a nice sheen on it. Okay, so I'm going to turn this down because we don't want to burn the sauce. Okay, we just want to simmer it. Okay, so I'm going to leave these out, and then the other one I'm going to put in the refrigerator eventually, and then hopefully I'll freeze those. If not, it's going to be a pizza kind of week. Okay, this tool that I was using, this is called a bench scraper or a dough scraper. Okay, it's a really great tool. It's great for dividing dough. That's why it's called bench scraper. You also use it like this to scrape the bench. It's great to move, transport food. So it's a very useful tool. If you don't have one, I highly recommend getting one. Okay. That one is a really good one. It's from a company called Edlund, which I don't think they make those anymore. They make a lot of stuff, but they don't make those dough scrapers anymore. They used to make a lot more utensils. Now they kind of focus on certain product lines. So their tongs are really legendary. Those are something I have of theirs. They make scales. They make knife storage blocks and wall mounts for commercial kitchens. So it's a good company, but they don't make those bench scrapers anymore. All right, so we are going to go back to our good old friend, the kitchen center, because the kitchen center is the center of these cooking sessions for this week. Okay, and what we're going to do now, while all this stuff is preparing, we're going to prepare the toppings. Okay, and we're going to start with the cheese. Okay, so we're going to add on our food processor attachment here. We're going to put the shredding disc on there, and we're going to grate some cheese. And I'm going to actually grate two types of cheese. So we're going to grate this mozzarella, which I got this big huge block from the grocery outlet, and I'm going to kind of cut a big chunk of that off. And then we're going to grate that. Okay, and I'm just going to trim some pieces off of it, just because it was in the freezer for a little bit, so there's just some parts that are a little freezer burned, so we don't want that. We want the freshest, nicest cheese we can get. So we're just gonna cut that, and then we're gonna cut it into these chunks, okay? So that we can feed it through the hopper, okay? So the nice thing about this is there's two sides. This one is actually gonna need the bigger one, okay? And we're gonna use the big bowl for these toppings. Okay, so I'm going to do, that says 6 or 8 for grating. So we're going to crank it up to 7 and we're going to see what we do. And this mozzarella is a very soft mozzarella. Mozzarella is a notoriously hard cheese to grate, so we're gonna clear out the feed tube here. We have a little backup. Okay, so did a good job there. Okay, we got all of our cheese grated, and you know, there's always a little bit that gets caught under the blade, so there's some that gets caught around the feed tube, especially these really soft cheeses. I mean, this brand, it's like a commercial brand, it's very gummy, okay? It's, even as far as mozzarella goes, it's pretty gunky. So it did a pretty good job for that cheese, okay? So I think I'm gonna grate the whole block, but we're gonna move on to some other cheeses before we do that. We'll come back to that maybe a little bit later. Okay, so we're gonna set that aside. So there's our grated mozzarella, and this is, you know, this is a really good thing to use this food processor for, because the grated cheese that you get in the store, that cheese is really, it's not the best. What they do is they use either cellulose, which is a wood pulp, cellulose is wood, or they use potato starch. Either way, it makes things really gunky for your cheese, okay? So that's, okay. We're gonna have to do something different. We're gonna use a different attachment for this cheese. This is the Fontina, and if you leave cheese in the refrigerator for too long, it can get basically dried out. This one's the same way. Okay, so we're gonna have to grate that a different way using the blender. Okay, so I'll show you how to do that in a second. But we have another cheese. We have my my very favorite, the Land O'Lakes creamy Italian blend. So we're gonna grate that, and then I'll show you how to do the other ones. Okay, so we're gonna put our food processor here, run it. Again, it gets a little caught up on the chute there, and that's that. Okay, so we're all good with that. Our cheese is all grated, that cheese. Now we're gonna go to the ones that are over ripened. Okay, so again, and this is from the booklet that says that you can do that. Okay, so what you can do is you can take the cheese, if it became hard, if it was a soft cheese and it's become a hard cheese, which both of these fall into that category, you just are going to cut it up into little pieces. Okay, so I'm going to cut the rind off first. Okay, and then we're going to cut it into pieces. Okay, and I would imagine the smaller you can cut this, the better it's going to be. So we're going to try and really dice it up into cubes. Okay, so there's our fontina, and we're going to do the same with this sharp provolone. The sharp provolone is actually a little softer, so that one shouldn't be too big of a problem. But we're going to see how we can get this. Okay, so they've both kind of become like a Parmesan type texture. Okay, so we're going to put the blender, attach the blender on, make sure it's locked in. Okay, then we're going to start the blender, and we're going to do it high. Okay, so we're going to run it, and then we're going to drop in. Oops, whoa. All right, let's try a smaller piece. All right, let's try a couple pieces. That worked kind of good. Didn't sound very good, but it worked pretty good. All right, so we're gonna do that again. And I'm gonna just load in a bunch of pieces of cheese, and then I'm gonna put the cap on and see how that works. Wow, that worked even better because we kind of mixed the two. So some of the cheese, like I said, the sharp provolone is a little bit more amenable. So we're going to try that again. I'm going to mix up the cheeses so we get some Parmesan, or I'm sorry, not Parmesan, some Fontina and some provolone together. Okay, pop that on. I have never done this, and let me tell you, it works really good. And I'm so glad to know that this works like this, because it really bums me out when this happens. I used to be like a cheeseaholic and eat cheese all the time. And I love cheese and I love variety of cheese, but I'm just not eating as much as I used to. So it's good to know I can save my cheese. Because this happens with really, I mean, these are really expensive cheeses. Like, these are imported Italian cheeses. So, you don't want to waste them. So this is a great way to bring them back to life. So we're just gonna keep going with this, because this is working pretty good, and I would like to use up all this cheese. And I think that this combination of cheeses really works. So, because like I said, the sharp provolone is a little bit better. A little bit softer, I should say. Okay, so they kind of help each other out. I know I should not be impressed and surprised that something that they tell you can do in the manual works, but you know, whenever you've never done something before, it's just, you know, it's one thing to hear that it can be done. It's a whole nother thing to actually see it being done. Okay? Okay, so I will do more of this later, but I just want to show you some of the other functionalities of this food processor. Okay, so we're gonna prepare some of the other, and I'm just gonna mix this up so it's just all kind of combined. So I'm gonna show you some of the other functionalities. So we're gonna use the slicing disc now, and I'm just gonna prepare some onions for this, okay? And I'm just gonna use a regular old bowl for this, okay? So, my friend returned my big bowl here, my friend Nicole, who I've talked about before. So we're gonna put that there. And we're just gonna put some onion in there, and we're gonna slice it up. And this is a great onion to do this with because it's already kind of sliced. I'm just gonna take off the root end, and I usually leave the root end because we're gonna put it at 8 because I want to make sure that I have it to cut with the knife. But since we're doing this, I could just do it. Okay. Okay, so we got our sliced onion here. Oh wow, okay. So most of it is tucked under the blade here. Okay. So take that off and just work that down the chute. Oh, that's why. Because I forgot to put the slinging disc back in. Oh, silly Joe. This is what pushes it out. Okay, so that was not in there, so that's why it just was sitting under the blade. Okay, so we're gonna clean off the blade there. So I'm gonna kind of do mushrooms and onions, and the last thing I'm gonna do is some shallots. Okay, and again, the mushrooms are already sliced. I'm kind of sad that I didn't already get the full one so we could showcase this, but I got that. Okay, so then you have, that's the large pusher. Then you have the medium, and I'm going to use the small one, okay, because this will go in there, and then you can use that. So you leave the medium pusher in there, and then you use this as the small one, okay? All right, so we have our shallot sliced here, and you know what? We'll do one more of them. I need these for something else, but we could do one more because they add like a nice color. Okay, so there you have it. That thing did a darn good job. Okay, so we'll be back when the oven is preheated, when the sauce is done. It's all going to be done at the same time, and then we're going to make the pizzas, and then I'm going to show you how to make them, how to put them into the oven, how to not use a screen, which I think is a really good thing to know, because the screens, it's a barrier, so you don't get as crisp a crust as if it's just sitting on the stove. So I'm going to show you how to do that when we are making the pizzas. Okay? So see you soon, Kitchen Kings and Queens. Okay, Kitchen Kings and Queens. We are about ready to start making pizza. Okay, so the trick to making pizza and using the peel, which is this guy right here, okay, I'm gonna pop this down, is you have to flour things well, okay? So let's start with the dough, okay? So we're just gonna make sure that this dough is just totally covered in flour and that there's no parts of it that are sticky or not floured well, okay? Now, you don't want a lot of excess flour, but you do need it on the peel, okay? So I'm gonna flour this peel, and what I'm gonna do to the peel is I'm actually just gonna rub this flour into the peel. And this is a great peel. This is a brand called Epicurean. You can see it says Wustaf here, but that's just the pack up that they did. But this peel is actually made by a company called Epicurean. And they're the ones that I use for cutting boards. They're the ones that I use for a lot of different things. Because they're great. It's not plastic. It's like a composite, a natural composite material. So it's really a great company. Okay, so then you're gonna stretch out your dough. Okay, now you can use your fist to do this. Okay, I don't recommend the twirling thing. You can do that. That's more for show. It's not actually, doesn't really do a whole lot. Okay, but the key is you want your dough stretched out as much as you can. And you see how it moves on there? As long as it's moving on there like that, you'll be able to get it off the peel and into the oven. Okay, so we're gonna start with this one, with the supreme one. Okay, so we got our pizza, and I'm gonna use this on the round stone. You'll see when we put this into the oven, there's two peels or there's two stones in there. One is round and one is rectangular. I'm gonna put this one in the round one. Okay. So I'm gonna bring over a ladle full of our sauce here. Okay. See, it's nice and tomatoey. Oh, it smells so good. So you want probably a little more than that. Okay, probably like a ladleful and a half will be good there. Okay, and you just want to kind of spread it out. You want to make sure that everything gets everything. Okay. So there is our sauce. And again, if you just kind of start from the beginning, you can kind of get that in there. I'm going to just add a little bit more there. Okay, so there's our sauce. Now we're going to use our cheese. And as I was grating the last little bit of that mozzarella, it started, you really have to, like, that was a lot of mozzarella. That was like, God, I don't know, like 4 or 5 pounds of mozzarella. You're not going to grate that much. If you put it in the freezer for like 30 minutes before you grate, that's a really good idea, because that will allow for the cheese to firm up and you won't get this kind of gunkiness. You also could use like a drier mozzarella. I mean, it's a good mozzarella, but it's made for pizza. Okay, so now we're gonna put on our shallots and our onion. Okay, and you don't want to make it too heavy too. Okay. I had this sausage here. I think it's pepperoni. I don't know. It was just kind of a bit of different sausages. I think it's pepperoni. It's pepperoni. Okay, and this is a nice pepperoni too. It was like a, I don't know how to describe it. Just like a natural pepperoni. And this I actually sliced up in the food processor too. So it's not this one, or not today, but I did it before. Okay, and I'm going heavy on this just because I want to use it up, but you can not use as much pepperoni. Okay, and then I'm gonna put some mushrooms on there. And these are baby bala mushrooms, which are like a portobello mushroom, but they're small. So we're just gonna put some slices of that on there. Okay. And it looks, it's like all piled up, but it will go down. Okay, and I'm not gonna put too much of these on there because I really need these for something else, but I do want to add them on there. Okay. All right. So we're gonna give this one last little loosening up. Okay, so we got a couple of runaway toppings there, but you got to make sure that it moves on this peel. Okay. All right, so now we're ready to go to the oven. Okay, the moment of truth. We're gonna pop this bad boy into the oven. Okay, so there's gonna be a little smoke because it was burning off of the stone, but you just want to use like a shaking motion, and that will get the it off. I'm sorry, I was just wanted to make sure it sits on that stone. Okay, then we're gonna do one more. We're gonna do the cheese one now, and then we'll put that one in. So we'll go back over here. Okay, so we're back over here at the station here, and we're going to make sure we have enough flour. I'm going to put more flour on the peel, and we're just going to really flour up our dough, flour our peel again. If there's any moisture on there, you just want to kind of rub it in and rub it off. Okay, and that should be good. Okay, so we're going to take our dough. You want to stretch it out. And this stone that I'm putting this one on is a little bit more forgiving because it's a rectangle and it's a little bit bigger than the circle one. So that's how I wanted to make sure I got the circle one done first, and then we'll go to the square one. And this pizza is going to be lighter because we're just using some cheese. Okay, this is just going to be a plain cheese one. And again, I just want to really make sure my board has flour on it so that we don't stick, okay? That's the key. The shaking motion, making sure that there is enough flour and that it can move on the peel. Those are your keys to getting it off, okay? And I used to be a screen guy, okay, because I was afraid of using the peel. Even when I worked at Gennardi's, I mean, Gennardi's, they kind of had you use the peel, or the screens, but I was always trying to learn because you just get a better pizza, and you'll see that when we take it out, okay? So I'm just using the last of this sauce. So if you're keeping track, that was like a pint of tomatoes. That made 2, and these are about like, I guess 16-inch pizzas. No, they're not quite 16. They're probably like 14-inch pizzas. Okay, so nothing, just your average, like a medium-sized pizza, these are. Okay. All right. There's our tomato sauce. We'll use the last of our janky cheese here. Okay. Then we'll go to our nicer mozzarella. And we're going to start with the mozzarella as kind of our base layer. And then we're going to use our blend, our 4 cheese. So this is like a 4 cheese pizza. We have mozzarella, we have sharp provolone, we have fontina, and we're going to put some Parmesan and some pecorino on there. So here's our pecorino, which is a sheep's milk cheese. So this is just going to give it kind of a funk. And you can use this kind of sparingly because it is strong. This is real Romano cheese. It's pecorino. But this is what I grew up with. We didn't use Parmesan. We used Romano because that's what they use in Abruzzo, so that's what we used. Okay, then I'm going to put some Parmesan on there. Actually, so I guess this is a 5 cheese pizza. And Parmesan and Pecorino, they really go well together because Parmesan is like a really rich cheese and the Pecorino just gives like a real cool funk. So you'll often see them together. So now we're adding our Franken cheese. So we have our 4 cheese blend, our creamy Italian blend. We have our grated fontina from the blender and our grated sharp provolone from the blender. Okay, all right. So there's that great pizza. Okay, again, just want to make sure she's mobile on there. Okay, and sometimes you just have to kind of shift it. All right, so we're going to go back to the oven, pop this in, take a look at our other one. Okay, so we're going to pop this oven open, take a look. Oh, wow, it's almost done. Okay, and we're going to put on our cheese pizza, and there you have it. Let's take a look at the underside of this. Okay, that one's almost done. Through that. So we probably got about 2 more minutes on that. I'm gonna put about 9 minutes for the one in there. All right, we'll be back and we'll take a look at these pizzas. Okay, we're gonna take out our first pizza, which is the mushroom and pepperoni. We're gonna bring it around. Turn this around here. Sorry to give you whiplash. So here's our pizza, and if you look, it's got a nice crust. So we're gonna cut it on this because that's one of the things I love about these Epicurean is it is a cutting board. It's cutting board material. So it's good to cut on there. You don't want to cut on the pan that I'm going to put it on because that pan is made of aluminum and it's very soft, and this is a stainless steel cutter so it can cut into the aluminum, and you don't want that. You don't want to ruin your pan. You don't want to get aluminum in there. Okay, so we're going to take this off. Let's remove the pan there. And we're going to push our pizza onto the pan. Now, this oh, that's good. I just had a little chef snack on the pan, on the peel. So you don't want to, you may want to stretch this out bigger, okay? If I had more surface area on my bricks, I would have stretched this out a lot thinner because A, the dough could have handled it, and B, you would get like a more thin crust pizza, a thinner crust. And I really love, I love all kinds of pizza, but I think thin crust is the best if you like pizza, okay? So if you take the pizza, look, there's very little flop. Really, the only flop is because of all the toppings. It's so heavy. But this is what I would call a good pizza, okay? And that was shallots, onions, mushrooms, and pepperoni. Okay, the other one is just about to come out. So I'm gonna get the other pan here ready for that one. That's our cheese one. And we're gonna take that one out. All right, it sounds like our cheese pizza's ready. Let's take a look at it. Check the area. Okay, so there's our, I'm going to turn off the oven because we are done with pizza for today. And we're going to come over here, cut this, and see what we got. All right, Kitchen Kings and Queens. So that's my version of thin crust pizza. I really enjoy making pizza. I enjoy eating pizza. I enjoy different types of pizza. So this is really one of my favorites. I hope you try these recipes. I hope you learned something. Please like, subscribe, share. If you think there's anyone that you know that might enjoy this. I love having new subscribers. I love people interacting. So if you have any techniques or things you'd like to share, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share. All right, bye for now, Kitchen King.